Millionaire sees his lost daughter with a black homeless woman, then realizes who she really is. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Daniel Carter had everything: money, power, and a big business. But he made the biggest mistake of his life. He was always so busy that one day he forgot his little daughter. Now, Olivia was lost, alone in the big city, scared and crying. A woman named Clara Monroe, who had no home and no family, saw Olivia standing all by herself. Clara stopped and looked at the little girl. She could see Olivia was afraid. Meanwhile, Daniel, Olivia's dad, didn't know yet that she was missing. He was too busy with work, taking phone calls and thinking about his business. That morning, Daniel dropped Olivia off at school. His car was big and black, and he barely looked at her as she sat in the back seat. When he stopped in front of the school, he said, "Go on, Olivia," while answering a phone call. He didn't check if she got inside. Olivia hesitated. She wanted to hug her dad, but he was too busy. Slowly, she stepped out of the car. The door closed behind her, and she shivered. She turned to wave, but the car had already driven away into the busy morning traffic. She looked up at the tall school building. Kids were running inside, parents were talking, and teachers were helping students. But Olivia felt alone. Something didn't feel right. She took a step toward the entrance, but stopped. Her dad really drove away without making sure she got in. Her chest felt tight, and her hands gripped her backpack straps. Her teacher had always told her to walk straight inside, but today she was afraid. She turned around. The city was loud. Cars honking, people talking, footsteps rushing by. Everything looked the same, and she didn't know which way to go. Her tiny heart started beating fast. She sniffled, her tears hot on her cheeks. She took small, shaky steps away from the school. The sounds of children playing faded, replaced by the deep, loud noise of the city. No one noticed the little girl walking alone. Across the street, Clara Monroe sat against an old brick wall. Her clothes were worn, and she was tired. She had slept on the ground again last night, but she was used to it. People walked past her like she didn't exist, looking away as if they didn't want to see her. She sighed and held an old photograph in her hands, a picture from a long time ago. She missed the people in the photo, but she tried not to think about them. Then she saw Olivia. The little girl was alone. Clara knew that lost look all too well. Olivia's small shoulders were shaking, her lips trembling as she whispered something no one could hear. The world kept moving, ignoring the frightened child. Clara's heart squeezed. She should look away. It wasn't her problem. But her feet moved on their own. She crossed the street and walked toward Olivia. Olivia wiped her tears, trying to breathe, but nothing around her looked safe. She wanted to find her dad, but she didn't know how. Just then, she felt someone near her, a soft, steady presence. She looked up and saw a woman with kind, tired eyes kneeling beside her. The woman's hair was messy, her coat too big, but she wasn't in a hurry like the other adults. She wasn't looking past Olivia. She was looking at her. "Hey, sweetheart," the woman said gently. "Are you lost?" Olivia sniffled and nodded. Her lower lip trembled. Clara looked around. She knew the city wasn't safe for a lost little girl. She carefully pulled her coat around Olivia, hiding her from strangers. "It's okay," she whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." Olivia reached out, gripping Clara's sleeve. She was scared but held on tight. "I want my daddy," she whispered. Clara's chest ached. She swallowed, then gave Olivia a small nod. "I know, little one," she said softly, "but for now, you're not alone. I'll help you." Clara held Olivia's small hand and walked her away from the busy street. Her sharp eyes kept checking their surroundings. A lost little girl could be in danger. Olivia trusted her, and Clara wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. They turned into a small alley away from the big crowds. The ground was cold and the air smelled like old bricks. Clara looked down at Olivia. "We'll rest here for a little while, okay, sweetheart?" she said. Olivia hesitated, then sat on the driest spot she could find. Her fingers clutched her backpack as if it could protect her. Clara crouched beside her, pulling her sleeves over her cold hands. She brushed a curl from Olivia's face. "Hey," she said softly. "You're doing great, you know? You're really brave." Olivia looked up at her with big, teary eyes, but then quickly looked away. Clara sighed and leaned against the wall. "I know this is scary," she continued, "but I promise I won't let anything happen to you." Olivia hesitated, then slowly scooted closer, her small shoulder pressing against Clara's arm. Clara felt something warm and painful in her chest. She had never been anyone's safe place before. Not for a long time. But now, this little girl was counting on her. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel Carter's world was falling apart. He arrived at Olivia's school, still thinking about his work. But when he stepped out of his car, something felt wrong. A strange, awful feeling filled his stomach. Then he saw the teacher's worried face. Everything stopped. "Where is she?" His voice was sharp, his heart beating too fast. The teacher frowned. "Mr. Carter, Olivia never came to school today." The words hit him like a hammer. His stomach twisted. His pulse pounded in his ears. "That's impossible," he snapped. But then his mind replayed the morning, the phone call, the rushed goodbye, the way he drove away without checking. His breath caught. "No, no, no, no. We need to find her," he said, his voice cracking with fear. The teacher was already reaching for her phone, but Daniel was faster. His hands shook as he called his security team. "Olivia is missing," he barked. "I need every available man searching for her now." Back in the alley, Olivia wiped her nose on her sweater. The big panic was slowly turning into tiredness. Clara watched her closely. The child was still scared, still shivering. "You know," Clara said softly, "I used to be scared too when I was little." Olivia peeked up at her, curiosity shining through her fear. "You were?" Clara nodded. "Oh yes. I was scared of thunderstorms. I used to hide under my blankets and pretend the thunder was just giants talking in the sky." Olivia blinked. "Giants?" A tiny wobbly smile almost appeared. Clara nodded. "The biggest ones you can imagine. They were loud, but I like to think they were friendly. Maybe they just didn't know how to whisper." Olivia let out the smallest giggle. For just a second, the fear in her chest lightened. "Do you still get scared?" Olivia asked softly. Clara hesitated, then exhaled. "Not of thunderstorms anymore," she admitted, "but yes, sometimes." Daniel clenched his fists as he paced in front of the school. His security team was already looking for Olivia. The police had arrived, asking calm questions that only made his fear worse. "When did you last see her? What was she wearing? Could she have wandered off alone?" Daniel clenched his teeth. His heart was heavy with sadness and anger at himself. How could he have been so careless? Olivia wasn't just some meeting he could miss. She was his daughter, his little girl. And now she was lost, out there alone, scared, and it was all his fault. His whole body tensed as he grabbed one of his men by the collar. "Find her," he hissed. "I don't care what it takes. Find her." In a quiet alley, Olivia leaned her head against Clara's arm. Her small fingers held onto the woman's sleeve. "Did you ever have a home?" she asked in a soft voice. The question made Clara's heart ache. She looked away for a moment before forcing a small smile. "I had many things, sweetheart," she said gently, "but I lost them all." Olivia stared at her for a long time, trying to understand something too big for her little mind. Then, without saying a word, she reached for Clara's hand and held it tightly. Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had lost everything, but maybe, just maybe, she had found something again. The night was long and cruel for Daniel. He couldn't sleep. Every hour without Olivia made his heart hurt more and more. The city felt huge, like a giant maze that had swallowed his daughter. He searched everywhere, retraced every step, asked people if they had seen her, and checked security cameras. His team searched through alleys and train stations. The police had even called her a missing child. But there was nothing, no sign of her. The hours passed, and Daniel felt worse and worse. His hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His jaw ached from how hard he was biting down. He had failed her. And if something bad happened to Olivia, he swallowed hard, pushing the thought away before it could grow worse. Then, just as the sun was rising, his phone rang. The number was unknown, but he answered it without hesitation. "Hello?" His voice was rough and tired. "Mr. Carter?" The voice on the other end was serious but careful. "This is Officer Ruiz. We may have a lead on your daughter." The world around Daniel seemed to shake. He didn't even let the officer finish before demanding, "Where? Where is she?" There was a pause, then the officer spoke again. "A witness saw a little girl who looks like Olivia. She was with a woman near an old cafe on 6th Avenue. Daniel didn't waste a second. He barked orders at his security team and rushed to his car. He drove as fast as he could, ignoring red lights and honking cars. His heart pounded in his chest. The thought of Olivia being scared and alone was too painful. But there was something else. A woman, a stranger, had found his daughter. Who was she? What did she want? His fingers gripped the steering wheel so hard they went numb. He didn't know what he was walking into. But none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was Olivia. As Daniel turned onto 6th Avenue, the sunlight stretched over the streets. The city was waking up. He parked his car quickly, jumping out before it even stopped moving. His eyes scanned the street, his heart hammering in his chest. Then he saw her. Olivia. She was standing near an old bench, holding on to the hand of a woman. Relief crashed over Daniel like a wave. His breath caught in his throat. But then his eyes moved to the woman beside her, and time seemed to stop. The world tilted beneath his feet. Clara. At the sound of his voice, the woman's head snapped up. Clara Monroe. The woman he once loved. The woman he lost. She stood frozen, her tired eyes wide with shock. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was heavy with something neither of them could explain. Olivia, not knowing the history between them, clung to Clara's side, looking between them with big, uncertain eyes. Clara's lips parted, but it took her a second to find her voice. Daniel. She didn't just sound surprised, she sounded like she was carrying a deep hurt from the past. The past hit both of them like a storm, strong and unstoppable. Daniel took a slow step forward, barely able to breathe. He had spent the whole night imagining Olivia in danger, being taken by a stranger. But now, standing before him, was someone he had once known better than anyone. Someone who had been torn from his life by family expectations and time. She looked different, thinner, her eyes no longer bright, her clothes worn. Life had changed her, but it was still her. Clara Monroe, his past, his biggest regret, and now she was holding his daughter's hand like she belonged in his world again. Clara's grip on Olivia tightened as if she thought Daniel might take her away. Her shoulders stiffened like she was ready to protect the little girl. "You're her father," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. She had already figured it out. Olivia looked between them, sensing something big but not understanding it. "Daddy?" Her small voice broke the moment. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands shaking. "Olivia, sweetheart," he breathed. "I'm here. I'm so sorry." Olivia hesitated, then threw herself into his arms. Her little body trembled against him. He held her tightly, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I was so scared," she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "Me too, baby. Me too." Clara watched them, her expression unreadable. She crossed her arms like she was trying to keep herself together. She had never expected this. Of all the lost children she could have found, it had to be his. Fate was cruel, or maybe fate had decided it wasn't finished with them yet. Daniel looked up at Clara, still kneeling, still holding Olivia. The air between them was heavy with memories. He let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "How?" His voice trailed off. He didn't even know what he was asking. Clara met his gaze, her face unreadable. She wasn't going to let him see how much this affected her. "I found her," she said simply. "She was alone. She was scared. She didn't add what she really wanted to say, because you left her there, because you didn't look back. Daniel nodded slowly, his throat tight. So many questions filled his mind, but none of them mattered. Not yet. Right now, all he knew was that Clara Monroe, the woman he had once loved, had saved his daughter. And whether she wanted to or not, that meant she was part of his life again. Daniel held Olivia close. She held onto his shirt tightly, but his eyes stayed on Clara. The woman standing before him looked so different from before. Her clothes were old, her hair messy, and she was much thinner than he remembered. But the thing that shocked him the most was her eyes. They used to be warm and full of life, but now they looked sad and far away. He could not believe what he was seeing. This was not just a surprise, it was like the past and the present crashing into each other. He had locked his memories of Clara away, thinking they were gone forever. But now she was right here, standing between him and his daughter, the daughter he had almost lost. His heart told him to take Olivia and leave. He needed to keep her safe. But when he moved, Olivia didn't. Instead, she stayed close to Clara, holding onto her coat. "Come on, sweetheart," Daniel said softly, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're going home." Olivia shook her head and looked up at Clara with unsure eyes. "She kept me safe, Daddy," she whispered. "She's nice." Clara sighed quietly and looked down at Olivia. She reached out and touched the little girl's hair with gentle fingers. Daniel's chest felt tight. Clara had taken care of his daughter. She had protected her. That thought hurt. Not because he didn't trust Clara, but because Olivia needed protection in the first place. He should have been there. He should have kept her safe. But instead, his daughter had found comfort with a stranger. Daniel turned back to Clara, and frustration filled his voice. "What happened to you?" he asked. His voice was sharp, filled with anger and confusion. He needed answers. The years had changed her, but how? Why was she like this now? Clara did not look away. She stood tall and met his eyes. "I survived," she said simply. Those two words felt like a heavy stone in Daniel's chest. They hurt more than any long explanation ever could. "That's not an answer," he snapped, stepping closer so Olivia wouldn't hear the anger in his voice. "How did you end up like this? On the streets? This isn't you, Clara." Clara let out a breath and shook her head. "It doesn't matter, Daniel," she said in a calm but firm voice. "I don't owe you my story." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Damn it, Clara, after everything." He stopped himself. Olivia was watching them with big, confused eyes. She was too young to understand what was happening, but she could feel the tension between them. Clara crouched down and tucked a curl behind Olivia's ear. She smiled at the little girl softly, like she was memorizing her. "You'll be okay now, sweet girl," she said. "Your daddy's here." But Olivia hesitated. She looked between them and then grabbed Clara's sleeve again. "You can come too," she whispered. "You don't have to be alone." Daniel's heart ached. Olivia didn't see the past, the pain, or the anger between him and Clara. All she saw was kindness, and for her, that was enough. Clara's smile turned sad. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "It doesn't work that way." She gently took Olivia's little hand off her coat and kissed her forehead. Then she stood up and looked at Daniel. He wanted to demand answers, to ask how her life had turned out this way. But all he could say was a quiet whisper. "What happened to you, Clara?" This time, there was no anger in his voice, just disbelief, just pain. Clara's eyes met his. Something unreadable flickered in them. Then she exhaled and gave him a small, bitter smile. "What was always going to happen, Daniel?" she said. "I was forgotten." That one word, forgotten, hit Daniel hard. It filled the space between them, making everything heavier. He had nothing to say. No argument, no words that could change what had already happened. Clara Monroe had once been everything to him, and now she was a stranger holding his daughter's hand. Olivia tugged on his sleeve. "Can we see her again, Daddy?" she asked, her little voice soft. Daniel looked down at his daughter. She was innocent. She didn't understand everything, but she felt something. He swallowed and looked back at Clara. Where are you staying? He asked. Clara raised an eyebrow, a small, amused look crossing her face. You really think I have an address to give you? Daniel sighed and rubbed a hand down his face. Then at least let me. No, Daniel, she interrupted, her voice strong. You don't get to fix this. Not this time. Daniel clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue, but what could he say? Clara had always had a way of making him feel things he couldn't control. She sighed and shook her head. Take care of your daughter, Daniel, she said. That's all that matters now. And with that, she turned and walked into the morning crowd. Daniel stood there, holding Olivia's little hand, watching the only woman he had ever truly loved walk away. He told himself to let her go. She had made her choice. He had his daughter, and that was what mattered, right? But then Olivia's voice broke the silence. Daddy, she whispered. I don't want her to leave. Those words hit him harder than he expected. His daughter had found safety with a woman he barely knew anymore. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. Then before he could stop himself, he made a decision. Stay here, he told Olivia gently, and then he turned and ran after Clara. He found her near a small coffee shop. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the ground. She looked small, unnoticed. It made his heart ache. This was not the Clara he knew. Clara, he called softly. She tensed but didn't turn. Just let me go, Daniel, she muttered. You got what you wanted. No, he said firmly. Not yet. She finally turned to face him. What do you want? Her voice was tired, guarded. Daniel took a deep breath. Come with us. Clara's eyebrows furrowed. What? Stay with us, he repeated that. Just for a few days, until Olivia feels safe again. She let out a small, bitter laugh. You want to play hero now? You think letting me stay at your fancy house is going to fix your guilt? Daniel clenched his jaw. This isn't about me, he said. It's about Olivia. She trusts you. She needs you. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. I don't need your pity, Daniel. But before he could say anything, a small voice spoke again. Please, Miss Clara. Olivia stood there, clutching her backpack straps, her big, hopeful eyes looking up at Clara. Please don't go. Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She looked at Olivia, at her innocent face, and something inside her cracked. Daniel saw it, the struggle inside her. He said nothing. He let the moment breathe. Finally, Clara let out a slow breath. She rubbed a hand over her face. Just for a few days, she whispered. For her, Daniel agreed. Maybe, just maybe, this was a new beginning. Clara sighed and looked down. She whispered, This doesn't change anything about the past. Daniel looked into her eyes and said, But it might change what happens next. They didn't say anything after that. Instead, Daniel turned and started walking to his car. Clara walked beside him, and between them was little Olivia. She held both of their hands tightly. For the first time in years, the distance between them didn't feel so big. The car ride to Daniel's huge house was very quiet. Olivia had fallen asleep in the back seat, curled up against Clara. Clara sat stiffly, staring out the window at the bright city lights. Slowly, the city's streets changed. The busy roads became quiet, and instead of small houses and shops, there were big, fancy houses with huge gates. Clara's fingers gripped the edges of her old, worn-out coat. She didn't belong in a place like this. She never had. And yet, here she was, sitting in the fancy car of a man who once meant everything to her. But then, he became nothing, just a ghost from her past. Daniel was sitting next to her, glancing at her from time to time. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. He wanted to say something, to make things less awkward. But what could he say? How could words fix years of hurt? Instead, he let out a deep breath and focused on the road. The big gates of his house opened, and the car slowly rolled inside. It stopped in front of a house so big it looked like a castle. It was made of shiny glass and strong steel, standing tall and perfect. It was nothing like Clara, who sat beside him. As soon as Clara stepped out of the car, she felt people watching her. The workers in the house, dressed in neat, clean uniforms, moved around quickly. But when they saw her, they paused. She knew what they were thinking. A woman like her did not belong in a place like this. She was wrapped in a coat that was too big, her hair was messy, and her shoes were old and torn. But she lifted her chin and stood tall. She had survived much worse than judgmental stares. Inside, the house was too clean, too perfect. A golden chandelier hung from the ceiling, making the whole place glow. The furniture was expensive, the decorations flawless. Everything looked like it had never been touched by sadness, hunger, or pain. This was not her world. Daniel must have noticed her hesitation because he quickly turned to one of the maids. "Prepare a guest room," he said firmly. "She'll be staying for a few days." The maid hesitated for a moment before giving a small, polite smile. Then she hurried away. Clara scoffed. "You made arrangements so fast, I'm surprised you didn't just book me a hotel instead." Daniel turned to her, his jaw tightening. "Olivia wants you here," he said, "and whether you like it or not, you need a place to sleep." His voice softened, but there was also frustration in his eyes. "Let me help you." Clara shook her head. "I don't need your charity." Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's not charity, Clara, it's common sense." But she didn't budge. She stared at him firmly. Finally, he let out another deep sigh and gave up. Upstairs, Olivia's room was different from the rest of the house. It wasn't cold and perfect, it was warm and full of life. Soft colors covered the walls, stuffed animals sat on the bed, and little drawings were pinned up everywhere. It was clear that Olivia was trying to make the space feel like hers. Olivia, still sleepy, reached for Clara as soon as she was carried into the room, her small arms wrapped tightly around Clara's neck. "Stay," she mumbled. Clara hesitated and looked at Daniel, who was standing by the door, watching them. He saw the way Olivia clung to Clara, the way she felt safe with her. It shouldn't have bothered him, but it did. Clara had saved Olivia, after all. But still, it hurt. Clara, feeling Daniel's gaze, carefully laid Olivia down and stroked her hair. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart," she whispered. For the first time that night, Olivia smiled in her sleep. The house was quiet after Olivia fell asleep. Clara stood on the balcony, looking out at the huge estate. She had never felt more lost. She could still feel the judgment of the houseworkers, still feel the way Daniel looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Daniel appeared beside her, leaning against the railing. His presence was heavy, but it wasn't unwelcome. "She loves you," he said after a moment. Clara let out a small laugh. "She barely knows me." Daniel turned to look at her. "That doesn't change what she feels." A long silence followed. Then Clara sighed. "This won't change anything, Daniel. I'm still leaving." He nodded, but his face was unreadable. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but for now, you're here." The next morning, everything changed. Olivia, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, ran to Clara and hugged her waist. Then, in a soft voice, she whispered, "I wish you were my mommy." Clara froze. Daniel, who had just walked into the room, also stopped in his tracks. The air became heavy with emotions neither of them were ready for. Olivia didn't mean to hurt her father's feelings. She didn't understand what she had just said. But Daniel did, and so did Clara. Daniel's throat tightened. Pain flashed across his face before he quickly hid it. Clara forced a smile and stroked Olivia's hair. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently, "you already have a wonderful daddy." But Olivia only hugged her tighter, as if Clara's presence made everything feel better. Daniel turned away before they could see the emotion in his face. He had made a mistake bringing Clara here. Not because she didn't belong, but because she did. The days passed in a strange rhythm. Clara tried to stay invisible, like a guest who would leave soon. But that became impossible because of Olivia. The little girl always found her, always pulled her into her routines. Mornings were filled with sleepy smiles and little hands pulling her to the breakfast table. Afternoons were spent reading books in the library, Olivia resting her head on Clara's shoulder. And nights were the hardest. That was when Daniel would stand in the doorway, watching them, silent. He saw how Olivia clung to Clara, how she laughed with her in a way she never did with him, how she listened to every word Clara said, and worst of all, he saw how easy it was for Clara. She didn't have to try. Olivia simply loved her. One evening, Daniel stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights. He held a glass of whiskey, but didn't drink it. He had built a life so strong that no one could take it away. But now, in his own home, he realized he had been blind to what truly mattered. Olivia needed him, but he had never been there for her in the right way. And now, another woman, a woman he had loved and lost, was filling the space he had left empty. "What are you doing out here?" Clara's voice was soft but steady. Daniel turned and saw her standing at the doorway, arms crossed. Her hair was messy from where Olivia had slept against her. His jaw tensed as he looked at her. "I could ask you the same thing." She let out a small laugh and stepped onto the balcony. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "This house is too quiet." Daniel scoffed. "That's ironic. I built it to be a sanctuary." Clara looked at him, raising her eyebrow. Her voice was careful, but there was something sharp underneath. "Your money? Your power?" she asked. "Because this has never really been a home." Daniel held his glass tightly but didn't argue, maybe because he knew she was right. Instead, he took a deep breath and turned to face her completely. "Tell me what happened," he said, his voice softer, almost sad. "Tell me how you ended up like this." Clara's body stiffened and her eyes turned dark. She knew he would ask this question. Every time he looked at her with pity and confusion, she felt it coming. But hearing it out loud from him made her chest feel tight with anger. "That's none of your business," she said coldly. Daniel got angry. "The hell it isn't," he snapped, stepping closer. "You show up out of nowhere, holding my daughter's hand, and I'm just supposed to accept it without an explanation?" Clara let out a small, bitter laugh. "Oh, you," she said. "That's funny, Daniel. Tell me, did you ever ask yourself what you owed me when you walked away all those years ago? When you left me with nothing?" Daniel's breath hitched and his jaw tightened. "That wasn't my choice," he murmured. "You know that." Silence filled the air, heavy with memories neither of them had truly let go of. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You still hate me, don't you?" His voice wasn't angry. It was full of guilt, of regret. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. Then she finally answered, "Hate you?" Her voice was softer but distant. "I don't even know if I feel anything for you anymore." It was the truth, and that made it hurt even more. Daniel didn't say anything. He couldn't. He just watched as she turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the weight of everything he had lost and the fear that he might never get it back. The next morning, the air inside Daniel's big house felt heavy, like something was pressing down on everyone. Clara could feel the house staff staring at her when she walked by, whispering behind her back. She knew they didn't want her there. But she wasn't there for them. She was only there for Olivia. Still, as she walked past the grand staircase, she felt uneasy, like something bad was coming. And then, as if she had called it with her own thoughts, the front doors swung open loudly, the sound echoing through the marble floors. A man walked in without hesitation. His name was Jonathan Carter. He was Daniel's father. Even though he was old, he still had a powerful presence. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his expensive suit was perfect. But his cold, sharp eyes held nothing but anger and control. He walked like a man who had never been told no in his life. He looked around the house with a disgusted expression before his gaze landed on Daniel, who was standing at the top of the staircase. Daniel already looked tense, already knowing why his father was here. "What is this nonsense I'm hearing?" Jonathan's voice was sharp and cold. "A homeless woman living under your roof?" Clara didn't flinch. She had faced worse than this man. She stood still as Jonathan's eyes finally landed on her, his face full of disgust. "Ah," he said, his voice dripping with dislike. So it's true. He turned back to Daniel, his lip curling. Tell me, son, how long before she starts stealing the silverware? His words were meant to hurt. But Clara had spent years building a wall against people like him. She refused to show any weakness. I didn't ask for anything from him, she said firmly. I don't need his pity, and I certainly don't need yours. Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. Of course you don't, he said mockingly. You never did you? You had your hooks in him from the start, and now you show up again pretending to be helpful when his daughter needs someone? How convenient. Clara's voice was steady. Olivia needed help. I was there. That's all that matters. Daniel clenched his fists at his sides. That's enough, he said, his voice controlled but full of anger. But Jonathan wasn't done. He turned to his son, his expression cold and harsh. Get rid of her, Daniel, he ordered, or you will regret it. The air in the room became heavy. The threat was clear. Daniel knew his father well. He knew how far he would go to stay in control. But Daniel wasn't a little boy anymore. He wasn't going to let Jonathan run his life. Daniel took a slow breath and met his father's gaze with determination. I already regret one thing, he said calmly, listening to you all those years ago. Jonathan's face darkened. Careful, son, he warned. You don't want to make an enemy of me. Daniel stepped closer, his shoulders squared. I stopped being afraid of you a long time ago. Silence filled the room. Jonathan studied Daniel closely and saw something he hadn't expected. A change. A change. A strength. And for the first time, Daniel saw something in his father's eyes. Realization. He had lost. Jonathan let out a slow breath and shook his head. You always were a fool when it came to her, he muttered before turning to leave. The heavy doors slammed shut behind him. As soon as Jonathan was gone, Daniel let out a breath, his hands still clenched into fists. He turned to Clara, who was watching him carefully. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Daniel met her gaze. Yes, I did, he said quietly, because I won't make the same mistake twice. The air in the house was still heavy, the echoes of Jonathan's threats lingering, but before Daniel could process it all, another storm arrived. The sharp sound of high heels clicking on the marble floor made Daniel's stomach twist. When he turned toward the entrance, there she was, Madeline Carter, his ex-wife and Olivia's mother. She stood in the doorway, perfectly put together in a fancy dress. Her blonde hair was flawless, her lips curved into a smirk as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Well, she said smoothly, looks like everything has fallen apart without me. Daniel clenched his jaw. He already knew where this was going. What do you want, Madeline? He asked, his tone tired but firm. She stepped forward, her heels clicking with every step. You lost our daughter in the streets, Daniel, she said sharply. Do you have any idea how that looks? How unfit that makes you? Daniel's hands curled into fists. I know I made a mistake, he said calmly. But Olivia is safe now. This conversation isn't needed. Madeline laughed, shaking her head like he was a foolish child. Oh, Daniel, she sighed dramatically. That's not how the courts will see it. She stepped even closer, lowering her voice but keeping her words sharp. You are not capable of raising her. You never were. But now, she gestured around the house, now you have a homeless woman living here too? Oh, this will be easier than I thought. At that moment, Clara stepped into the hallway, watching silently. When Madeline saw her, her eyes filled with disgust. Daniel saw where this was going. Don't, he warned. But Madeline was already smiling. A judge will never let a busy, reckless father keep his child, she said. And with a homeless woman in your house, you've already lost. Daniel was really angry. He took a step closer to Madeline, standing tall over her. He didn't just look upset anymore. He looked scary. His voice was low and strong when he spoke. Olivia is not something you can just take when you feel like it, Madeline, he said. You left her. You didn't want her. And now, just because you think it will hurt me, you suddenly care? Madeline's eyes flashed, but she didn't stop smiling. I don't have to care, Daniel, she said smoothly. I just have to be the better parent, and right now, that's exactly what I am. Clara stood still, her hands in tight fists, her nails digging into her skin. This wasn't her fight, but that didn't mean she wasn't angry. She knew what was happening. She had seen it before. Someone rich, someone powerful, looking at her and deciding she was the problem, deciding she was the reason something special should be taken away. Just like before. She looked at Olivia's bedroom door, her heart pounding. Was this it? Was this how it always ended? Daniel let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. You're not taking her, he said, his voice steady. Madeline smiled wider. She leaned in close and whispered, Oh, I know you'll fight me, Daniel. That's what makes it fun. Then she turned, her high heels clicking on the floor as she walked to the door. My lawyers will call you, she said over her shoulder. You should start getting ready. And then she was gone, leaving behind the strong smell of her fancy perfume and the promise of trouble. The room was too quiet. Daniel didn't move. His mind was spinning, his heart beating so fast it hurt. Then he slowly turned to look at Clara. She was still standing there, not moving, but he could see it. The way her hands were clenched, the faraway look in her eyes. She was remembering something. Something bad. He wanted to say something, that he was sorry, that he wouldn't let this happen, that he wouldn't let her be the reason Olivia was taken from him. But before he could speak, Clara shook her head. She let out a deep breath and turned away. I've seen this before, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I already know how it ends. Daniel's stomach twisted. No, he said firmly. Not this time. Clara didn't look at him. We'll see, she whispered. Then she walked away. Daniel stood there feeling everything crash down on him. And for the first time, he realized something truly scary. He wasn't just fighting for Olivia. He was fighting against everything from his past, against his father, against Madeline, against the part of himself that had once let go of the woman who had just walked away from him. This time, he wouldn't lose. Daniel's office felt heavy, like the air itself was too thick to breathe. His desk was covered in papers, legal documents, notes, reports from his lawyers. They had planned every little detail for the custody hearing, but none of it mattered. Because deep down, Daniel knew the truth. Olivia wasn't choosing him. She was choosing Clara. It had been happening for days now. The way Olivia didn't rush to sit with him at breakfast. The way she held Clara's hand when she was scared. The way she curled into Clara's lap at bedtime, playing with the woman's coat as she listened to a bedtime story. Daniel knew whose fault it was. His own. He had spent too much time at work, too many hours away from home, missing the moments that mattered, and now he was paying the price. Madeline had noticed. She had hired the best lawyers, ones who knew exactly how to attack men like him. Rich, busy, and not always there for their kids. They had gathered every little mistake he had made, the times he had worked late, the school events he had missed, the nanny's words about how Olivia usually went to bed before he even got home. But the worst thing, the thing that hurt the most, was what the lawyer said next. Your Honor, Madeline's lawyer had said in a serious voice, it's not just that Mr. Carter has been absent. It's that, in his absence, his daughter has grown close to another woman, a woman who is not her mother and has no legal responsibility for her. That was their biggest argument, that Olivia didn't see Daniel as her safe place anymore, that she had chosen someone else. And the worst part, it was true. The court had arranged an interview with Olivia. Daniel had hoped deep down that she would say something, anything, to prove she still loved him, that she still saw him as her father, as someone who would protect her. But when Olivia walked out of the interview room, holding Clara's hand tightly, Daniel felt sick. The court officer spoke in a calm voice, reading from his notes. We asked Olivia where she felt safest, he said. She hesitated for a long time before answering. Then she said, Miss Clara. Daniel felt his heart shatter. He looked at Olivia. She was pressing herself against Clara, her small fingers gripping the woman's coat like she was afraid to let go. And Daniel finally understood. His daughter didn't feel safe with him. Not first. Not more than anything. He had lost that place in her heart. Clara looked up and met his eyes. There was no happiness in her face. No feeling of winning. Only sadness. Only sadness. She hadn't tried to take Olivia away from him. She had just been there when he wasn't. Olivia tugged on Clara's sleeve, whispering something. Clara bent down, listening, then nodded. Then Olivia turned and spoke in a small voice. "Can we go home now?" Not, "Can we go to Daddy's house?" Just home. And home to her was wherever Clara was. Daniel swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. He wanted to tell Olivia to look at him, to choose him. But he couldn't, because this wasn't about winning. This was about something much harder to face. His daughter had needed him, and he hadn't been there. He let out a breath, running a hand down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Clara?" She looked at him, waiting. He hesitated, then for the first time let go of his pride. "Thank you." The words felt strange, but they were real, the only thing he could say without anger or resentment. And for the first time, Clara looked at him differently. She nodded. Not like she had won, not like she felt sorry for him, just with understanding. Daniel looked at his daughter one more time. He knew what he had to do. If he wanted to keep Olivia, if he wanted to be her father, not just in name, but in the way that truly mattered, he had to change. Before it was too late. The big fight between Daniel and his father, Jonathan, was always going to happen. It was like a storm getting bigger and bigger until it finally hit. For years, Daniel had listened to his father and did everything he was told. He thought the big company his father built was also his. But now, as he sat in his office, he realized it never really belonged to him. It was always his father's, not his. And now, for the first time ever, Daniel was ready to walk away, even if it meant losing everything, because he wanted to protect the people he loved. Suddenly, the office door slammed open, making the windows shake. Jonathan Carter walked in. He always looked powerful and cold. He never knocked before entering. "Tell me this isn't real," Jonathan said right away. His sharp eyes stared at Daniel as he walked to the big wooden desk. Daniel didn't get up. He didn't move. He just folded his hands and looked right at his father. "I've never been more serious," Daniel said. His voice was calm, but strong, like steel. Jonathan laughed, shaking his head. "You've lost your mind," he said, rubbing his forehead. "First, you take in some girl from the streets, and now you think you can just throw away everything we built? Do you even know what you're doing?" Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept himself calm. "What you built," he corrected. "I was just following your orders, but now I see the truth." Jonathan's face darkened. His nostrils flared. "Don't be dramatic, Daniel. You're my son. You have responsibilities. You have a legacy to continue." Daniel leaned forward a little, his eyes strong. "You mean your legacy. You never cared what I wanted. You only cared about being in control." Jonathan smirked. "And look where my control has gotten you. You are respected in every meeting, feared in every business deal. You should be unstoppable. But instead, you're throwing it all away for what? Some woman? Some child?" The words hit Daniel hard, but not in the way his father wanted. Some woman? Some child? That was all Clara and Olivia meant to his father? Just problems? Just things in the way? For the first time, Daniel saw his father clearly. He wasn't a great and powerful man. He was just a man who had forgotten what really mattered in life. "You ruined my life once," Daniel said, his voice quiet but strong. "You won't do it again." Jonathan's eyes turned cold. "If you leave this company, you lose everything. The money, the power, the security." He leaned in, his voice low. "I will cut you off, Daniel. Completely." His father thought this would scare him, make him change his mind. But instead, something strange happened. Daniel laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It wasn't a stubborn laugh. It was the laugh of someone who felt free for the first time. "Go ahead," Daniel said simply. Jonathan looked shocked. "Excuse me?" Daniel stood up and walked around the desk until he was face to face with his father. I said, "Go ahead. Take your money. Take your company. Take your empire. I don't need it. I'll build my own if I have to, but I won't lose my family." The room felt heavy with Daniel's words. Jonathan's face twisted into something unreadable. But Daniel didn't care anymore. For the first time in his life, he felt free. Meanwhile, across the city, Clara sat in a small cafe, her fingers wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. In front of her was a newspaper with red circles around job listings. She hadn't told Daniel she was looking for a job. She didn't have to. He was fighting for her and Olivia, but she didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want him to feel like he had to save her. She needed to stand on her own. She sighed and turned the page. The jobs were either too hard for her or didn't match what she knew how to do. Being a former assistant and now homeless wasn't exactly helpful for getting hired. But she had survived worse. She would figure it out. She had to. Because Daniel might have left his father's world, but she wasn't going to let him do it alone. That night, the house was quiet. Clara found Daniel sitting in the dim living room. His shoulders looked heavy, but his face looked lighter than it had in years. She hesitated before stepping inside. "You really did it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Daniel let out a slow breath and ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah," he said. "I did." She sat beside him. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. Then, after a moment, she reached out and touched his hand. "You don't have to fight alone this time," she whispered. For the first time, Daniel believed her. The courtroom was silent. It felt stiff, with rows of wooden benches and the smell of old books and paper. A clock ticked on the wall. It all felt too serious. Daniel sat at the table, his hands clasped together. This was the moment that would decide if he got to keep his daughter. His whole life had been about business, about power. But here, none of that mattered. Here, he was just a father. And for the first time, he realized that was the only thing that mattered. Across from him, Madeline sat tall. She wore a sharp navy blue suit, her blonde hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look at him. She didn't have to. Her face already said she thought she would win. Her lawyers wasted no time. They painted Daniel as a father who was too busy to take care of his daughter. They showed his work schedule, the times he missed her ballet recitals, the times she had to be with a nanny instead of him. Olivia didn't run to her father when she was scared, the lawyer said. She ran to Miss Monroe. That tells us everything. Daniel clenched his jaw but stayed quiet. Then it was his turn to speak. He stood, meeting the judge's eyes. "I won't deny I made mistakes," he said. "I was absent. I thought giving Olivia everything she needed with money was enough. I was wrong." The courtroom was silent. Then something unexpected happened. "Your Honor," a new voice spoke. Everyone turned. It was Clara. Gasps filled the room as she stepped forward. The judge looked surprised. "Miss Monroe, you don't have to speak." "I know," she said, "but I want to." Daniel's throat tightened. "Daniel isn't perfect," Clara said. "He made mistakes, but I've seen the man he's becoming." She looked at Daniel, her eyes soft. No child should grow up without their father. Silence. Madeline's lawyers whispered frantically, but Daniel only saw Clara. The judge looked thoughtful. "Mr. Carter," he said, "if I let you keep custody, how do I know you will change?" Daniel met his gaze, his voice unshakable. "Because for the first time in my life, I know what matters." Daniel walked out of the courtroom, feeling the weight of the judge's decision. The cool breeze touched his face, making him feel a little better. He had won, or at least, he hadn't lost. The judge said he could keep seeing his daughter Olivia, but with some rules. He had to prove that he was a good father, not just to the court, but to Olivia too. It wasn't the kind of victory he used to care about, but now all he wanted was to deserve the chance he had been given. Reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them. His eyes searched for Olivia. And there she was, holding Clara's hand tightly, just like she always did when she was scared. Seeing it still hurt, but now Daniel understood why. He walked up to them, his heart beating fast. Olivia looked at him, unsure. He crouched down so he could see her face better. "Come here, sweetheart," he said softly. She hesitated, but then let go of Clara's hand and stepped into his arms. Daniel hugged her tight, kissing the top of her head. He smelled her familiar scent and whispered, "I promise I'll never let you feel alone again." Olivia didn't say anything, but she held on to him tighter. That was enough. Clara stood nearby, watching them. She had done so much for Olivia, taking care of her when Daniel couldn't. He knew he could never thank her enough, but she had her own dreams, and she had been working towards them even before they met again. Still holding Olivia, Daniel turned to Clara. "I meant what I said in there," he told her, "about being a better man." Clara tilted her head, looking at him with a little doubt. "We'll see," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, only quiet understanding. A week later, Daniel had already started changing his life. The first thing he did was make sure he had time for Olivia every single day. No more missing her ballet recitals, no more coming home late when she was already asleep. His assistant was shocked when Daniel decided to work fewer hours, but Daniel didn't care. Work wasn't the most important thing anymore. For the first time, he felt something new: freedom. Meanwhile, Clara was finding her own happiness. She got a job at a children's shelter, helping kids who needed love and care. It wasn't about money or power. It just felt right. She worked hard, but she loved it. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was building something. But there was one more thing Daniel had to do. He needed to talk to his father. His father, Jonathan, sat behind his big desk when Daniel walked into the office. The room smelled like old books and leather, a place built on control. But Daniel wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm done," Daniel said simply. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Done with what?" Daniel took a deep breath. "With this. With your rules. You don't own me, and you don't own my daughter." Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. "You think you can just walk away from everything I built? From everything I gave you?" Daniel stood firm. "I don't need what you gave me. I'll build my own life, but I won't lose my family for it." Jonathan's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." Daniel just smiled. "No. For the first time, I know I won't." As expected, Jonathan was furious and cut Daniel off from the family business. But Daniel didn't care. For the first time, he was truly free. That evening, Daniel sat on the floor in Olivia's room watching her line up her stuffed animals. The warm light made everything feel peaceful. She looked up at him. "Daddy?" He smiled. "Yes, sweetheart?" She hesitated before moving closer and holding his hand. "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. He thought about it, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." And he meant it. The house was quiet that night. Daniel had read Olivia's favorite book twice because she had giggled and begged for just one more chapter. He watched her sleep for a while, knowing how close he had come to losing her. Then, as he stepped into the hallway, he saw Clara standing on the balcony. Her hair moved gently in the wind. She looked lost in thought, staring at the city below. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. She let out a little laugh. "You wouldn't be able to afford them." "Try me," he said with a small smile. She was quiet for a moment, then finally spoke. "I keep thinking about how much has changed and how some things haven't." Daniel swallowed. "Like us?" she sighed. "No matter how much I tried to tell myself otherwise, you're still the only man I ever truly cared about." Her words hit him hard. He had thought she had moved on, that he was just a bad memory for her. But now he knew the truth. "I lost you once, Clara," he said. "I won't make that mistake again." She finally looked at him, and for the first time there was no anger between them, just understanding. "I never stopped loving you, Daniel," she whispered. "I was just afraid to hope." He reached out, gently touching her cheek. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him. That was all the permission he needed. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It was soft, careful, and full of everything they had lost. When they pulled away, Clara smiled. "This feels dangerous." Daniel smirked. "Good. I'm done playing it safe." She raised an eyebrow. "And what now?" He took her hands in his. "Now, we build something new, together." For the first time, Clara believed they could. A few months later, the new children's shelter was finally open. The golden sun lit up the courtyard as kids laughed and ran around, pressing colorful handprints onto the walls. Olivia giggled as she placed her small blue handprint on the mural. Daniel stood nearby, watching her. He had spent years chasing the wrong things, but now he had found what truly mattered. Clara walked over to him, smiling. "You're going to change lives here," Daniel said. "We are," she corrected. "This wouldn't have happened without you." He shrugged. "I just signed the checks. You made it matter." She turned to him, her voice soft. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" He smiled. "No, but I'm glad we did." Olivia ran up to them, her hands still covered in paint. She looked up at them with big, hopeful eyes. "Does this mean I have a mommy now?" Clara froze for a moment. Daniel knelt and wiped a streak of paint from Olivia's cheek. Then, looking at Clara, he said, "Yes, sweetheart, it does." Olivia sighed happily and hugged Clara. Clara held her tight. This was home. Not a building, not a place. Them. Daniel kissed Clara's forehead. "I love you." This time, Clara didn't hesitate. "I love you too, and nothing will take us apart." As the sun set, their past faded away. It was time for a new beginning, one built on love, second chances, and the belief that some things are worth fighting for. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.